Okay, here we are with Katy Bowman. And I was just, before we got started, raving about my perfect movement plan, which is your book that is about to come out. And it kind of feels like it's the framework that ties, over a decade of experience in understanding movement and movement in context. And I only have one beef with it, Katy. The only beef that I have is that the word perfect hit me.
Oh, sure. I know.
Hit me the wrong way.
Mhm.
And so then I was, okay, well, then I need to put a new frame around perfect. And I looked up the definition. Was very helpful to me of perfect, which is having all the required or desirable elements, qualities, or characteristics as good as it possibly can be. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's actually what you're talking about, having all the desired qualities, like how our movement could have all the desired qualities for us.
For our individual qualities. That's why we added the word my, because your perfect movement plan is going to be different than my perfect movement plan. That's going to be different for someone else's perfect movement plan. So it's not a thing that anyone's necessarily shooting for. That's nebulous and that is out of context for them and their lives and their body, but rather it is something that is very dialed into what they find meaningful and what they find valuable and the way their physical body is at this time. And also, right off the bat, it's going to shift. You're not going to have one perfect movement plan throughout your life. It's going to change depending on your stage of life is the easiest way to say it.
Right, because I started working my way through it, and I haven't gotten through the whole thing. I want to actually take my time with it, and some of the exercises that you have us do are time consuming.
Written exercises because it's a workbook.
Yeah, it's a workbook, written exercises, lots of questions, and on the surface, I would be someone that if people were to meet me or talk to me about how much I move my body, they would say, oh, wow, you move your body a lot. You've got it covered. But as you start to dig deeper into this understanding of nutritious movement, which I think we should start there, you can see that there's some spots that maybe I'm not getting as many micro or macronutrients as my body needs, or too many was the other side of things, too many in some areas. So this concept of nutritious movement, I've talked to you a number of times about on this podcast, but you get it really dialed in this book in terms of this frame of movement, a metaphor to how we talk about food.
A metaphor, and also I think it actually works in a similar way cellularly, but I'll just start. We can let the metaphor go in a little bit more easily. So you probably have a high calorie movement diet, which is you probably exercise regularly, but also like you're shifting your body position regularly. You're taking walks, you have a garden, you have dynamic hobbies, your family keeps you dynamic. You're in a stage of life when you have younger children, they tend to naturally keep you moving more. So you've got the calories taken care of. But as we know from eating a food diet, calories isn't the only way, isn't even really a great way to see if you're getting the nutrition that you need from that food, because there are plenty of calories that don't contain the nutrients our body needs, or maybe they contain some, but we don't have foods that we eat that hold some essential nutrients, and so therefore we go malnourished. Or nutrients are so finicky, dietary nutrients and movement nutrients too, they're so finicky where it's all about the right amount. Too little and you're malnourished, too much of it and you're malnourished. So there is a target amount, which is why we have an RDA that tells you it's like you need sodium, but you don't need that much sodium, or you need vitamin D, but you don't need that much vitamin D. You want this idea of an amount of nutrients, and also that nutrition works in relationship to each other. You need all the nutrients. You can't just have some nutrients perfectly dialed in and not be malnourished overall. So we've got movement calories, and then we've got movement macronutrients. There are also movement macro categories. So that would be, on the most general level, make sure you're stretching, make sure you're doing strengthening, make sure you're exercising your heart and lungs, cardio. Those are sort of these general macro movement categories that we already think about. I actually have a slightly different framework for important reasons, but it's still this idea of I want to make sure my movement is distributed over these types of movement. And then what are the micronutrient equivalent for movement? It's like, how are all the joints that go into movement moving? Because you might be high in movement calories. Maybe you're a cyclist, a competitive cyclist, and you train for 6 hours a day, or maybe you train for 3 hours a day, but you ride your bike to and from work also, and you use it for errands. You're not going fast, but you're off and on your bike. Your movement macros would be off a little bit, right? You've got your cardio down and you've got some strength, but maybe your arms wouldn't say that they're challenged as much as your legs are doing those hills on a bike. And then when you get into the micros, it would be like, wow, I see that your hips are almost always in the chair position. When you're exercising and when you're not exercising or when you're not commuting, you have very little actual hip extension in your movement diet. And your arms are always out in front of you. I'm just looking at the shoulders, and it doesn't matter if you're on your computer, when you're done on your bike, your arms are sort of always in this fixed position. And then we start to see that you're getting these heavy doses of vitamin arms forward and legs forward, and too much of that almost, certainly in the relative context of very little arms overhead, very little spine being up straight because you spend so much time flex because of your cycling and computer work, particular diet in this, imaginary case. And so those micros are how are all the little parts moving, and making sure that your movement calories and your macro categories aren't leaving certain areas of your body undermoved.
Okay, so I love that you bring up cycling, because one of the first questions that you ask in the book around your movement, before we even do any of this macro, micro calorie thing, you get us to drill down to what is our why do we want to move our bodies? And this question you ask is, do you have any fears about your body's abilities in the next life stage? And one of my fears is, so my dad is a cyclist and was a cyclist my whole life. He still is a cyclist. At 75 years old, this man will get on his bicycle and he'll bike 50 miles. He's phenomenal, right? And when he lays down at night, he can't put his head on the ground because his neck has been in this forward position for so many hours. He's a unitasker when it comes to movement. He only cycled. He didn't run. He didn't walk. All these things. And his body is like when he gets off a bicycle, his body kind of looks like it's still on the bicycle. Yeah. And so then there's all these health related problems associated with that, right? Downstream from that. And we all, the things that I'm doing repetitively, right? In my life, I love to run. In my future, am I spending a lot of time in certain movement patterns that will make me maybe not have the ability to have dynamic movement as I age, right? So this is really good. We have movement calories, and then we can break it down into macros and micros. And you do have a different look on things besides just like do weightlifting twice a week. I mean, this are the CDC guidelines, right? So get 150 minutes of exercise, aerobic exercise per week, and lift weights twice a week is what's recommended.
Right.
A lot of people aren't getting those movement calories, but then even if we are getting those movement calories, there's more to it than just that.
And that was a challenge with writing a book, because I write those guidelines in this book to say, like, this is the way we're sort of dealing with this massive inactivity problem that is kind of plaguing the globe. Certainly certain areas or countries are higher in it, but it's something that's spreading. That this kind of sedentary lifestyle is spreading as we become more technologically advanced. It just becomes an option for more and more people. So I was like, if you're not already getting the minimums, is it fair to write a book that says, hey, there's even more than the minimums you need to consider, right? Because that can seem sort of compounding the problem. But that's why I think of this book is more about, even if you're just working on those minimums, this book is why you're not even doing those minimums, because we don't know how to fit it into our life. We don't know where movement goes if it's not exercise. And the fact that it doesn't have to be exercise is also the primary idea of this book is if the only thing you can think of as the way to get that 30 to 40 minutes a day of moderate to intense exercise or lifting, we'll call it resistance training twice a week, even the language around the guidelines leads you to think, I have to go to the gym. Where am I supposed to, I don't have this time. And I think that that's not the case, as I'm trying to argue for in the book.
Right. So you actually, I think there's a fear. Oh no, I'm not doing enough. And now I have to add in things for my neck. And, I'm going to have to add in things for my hip flexors. That's the fear. But the way that you solve that fear is radically changing the way we look at movement.
Yes.
And looking at it that exercise is just one part, labor is just one part of movement, and that we move and actively rest in all the domains of our life, and we can change the way in which we're bringing movement into those domains without really adding anything. It's changing, and in some ways actually enriching our experiences, because maybe now we're walking with our friends while we're talking to them, or we're doing therapy where I'm bringing movement into our therapy just to embody. I'll bring embodied demonstrations into the therapy room where I'll be like, okay, let's stand up and let's balance on one foot. And while you're balancing on one foot, try and bat away all your thoughts. And how well can you balance if you're batting your thoughts away while you're on one foot? And then I'm getting movement in, they're getting movement in, and then we're embodying and giving a demonstration that they'll remember a lot better down the road, right? So it's not, I guess I just want to highlight that for folks that feel bogged down by too many to-dos, that this book actually frees you up. It doesn't give you more.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, there's a resistance to a lot of times like the health and wellness space, because it's like another thing it just adds. Like the way we hear it is, I can't even get done my basic to-dos. And now you're telling me there's like another thing to do. And I'm trying to reduce the number of to-dos by, like I talk a lot about stacking with you, this idea of we're going to figure out how you can do less oftentimes to get more of the movement that you need. And that's an approach that we don't take often to solving problems. We try to figure out how to add something new instead of subtracting, freeing up time, freeing up space, freeing up movement, in this case, all at the same time.
So let's work through maybe one of my areas that I kind of got exposed in this book. We like to believe things about ourselves. And then when we actually start to look at ourselves, we actually get curious with an open, non-judgmental mind. We can see things that we didn't see. And one place so you have this model, the sloth model, where we're looking at movement in these different domains. We're looking at movement in our sleep, movement in our L for leisure, O for occupation, T for transportation, H for home. Okay, so I don't know about my sleep. We can talk about that, but I feel like my transportation is pretty minimal in terms of driving. I'm walking a good amount. I have got a great amount of movement and diverse movements in my home, great amount in my leisure, but in my work, now that I'm writing books, Katy,
I know, I hear you.
I could bring a lot more movement into the therapy space, even into podcasting, because I'm doing dynamic sitting and, but with writing books, my arms are up, my hands are in front of me. I have a weird shoulder pain. I'm getting back pain. All these new things are showing up.
So what do you do?
Yeah. Tell me the 3 exercises that I should do, Katy, to fix my back pain.
So I would have a different approach to that, right? So what I hear you saying is, well, actually, you just added it to the end because I have back pain, which you didn't mention before at all. So now I see that what you're trying to figure out is, where is this back pain coming from? And you've figured out that it's coming from your occupation domain because it's inactive, rather than maybe looking at it as on something broader that it might not be coming from that at all. It could be coming from the new, like what movements you are getting in all those other domains that you were talking about. And it could also be not for movement calories at all, but for how your movement macros balanced out. So I would not necessarily assume that it's because your occupation has become more sedentary. Now, if there's a separate question of, in general, I need more physical activity, and I'm not sure that's the case with you, but if you did need more movement calories and you were wondering how to increase movement calories in the domain of occupation when your, let's say, your tasks are more and less in place, which means that you have to sit with someone and do therapy, or or not necessarily you don't have to sit, but you have to occupy the same space with someone. You have to be with someone else as you do are working on therapy, or if you're writing a book, that something has to be put on paper somehow, whether it's like orally translated or you're plucking away at a keyboard. That's a more or less, those are in place tasks. So you would look at, the same things that you're probably doing in your home. You would create a more dynamic workspace for your computer. Like you could take it down low and stretch your lower back and type while you're sitting down. You could stand. You could stand on a wobble board, not just stand, but add something dynamic underneath your feet. You could make sure that very close to where you are writing, and writing is very rarely it's not like a phone call where the back and forth is constant. There's a lot of times where your mind sort of drifts and you're taking a 3-minute or a 5-minute thinking break. You're trying to figure out something. To have something very proximal to your writing area, Diana specifically, where you could hang, you could do something different with your shoulders. You could give yourself a ball and throw a ball back and forth, right, as you're standing in front of your computer, but mulling. You could tune in to when you've actually stopped being productive at all at writing, even though it's maybe your so-called writing time, and saying like, I'm going to go jump on this rebounder. I'm going to go stand outside and run through 3 minutes of stretches to boost my writing creativity, because, there's research that shows just you need to kind of create some movements, usually walking that they say, but I think you could really do any sort of rhythmic refresher for your body if there's something that you prefer besides walking, or you feel like you can't get that far away, to try to clear things up, to let that creativity back in. And I would still consider that writing time, rather than say, oh, I'm not able to stay focused, so therefore I'm not a good writer. It's like, this is part of your writing part.
Yeah, so you're throwing a lot of different ideas here. Some are dynamic standing, some of them are, kind of throwing things around, some are
Mhm.
walking. And as you were describing those, I was mentally trying to put them also into this movement pyramid that you've created, because
Mhm.
in some ways you're talking about some of the things that we may need more of, like active rest, but maybe there's some other components in there too that I could bring into my writing space that have to do with the movement pyramid. And it's that movement pyramid blew my mind.
Yeah, so the
So can
movement.
we talk about that? I want the listeners to get it, to get a
Yes,
chance.
I had said earlier, it might be not because of a lack of movement calories, which is what you're thinking. It could be too much of a micronutrient sitting flexed in front of the computer, or it could be just general issues because of this bigger imbalance in the movement pyramid. So the movement pyramid is like a food pyramid, that USDA food pyramid, where the bottom is the things that you need the most of, and then the amount you need them, but the amount that you need them decreases as you move up the pyramid. So at the bottom of the pyramid is active rest positioning, right? It's this idea that you're not just sitting in that same old standard conventional chair, sitting against the back. You're finding other ways to perch on the front of that chair using more core musculature. You're crossing your legs in your chair so that you're using your hips and your low back. You're getting different micronutrients for your sitting period of time. Maybe you're standing and doing therapy, which would be active rest. You're really kind of in place, but you're using more of your body when you're standing. It could be that writing desk that's low, that allows you to sit differently. So I feel like you probably have that covered, because I know personally that you've set up your home for more active rest positioning. You've set up your office. So we would assume that maybe you don't have a deficit there, but then you can move up in walking. Walking is the category of movement that we have a big need for. So you would look at your volume of movement, because that also stretches the back, right? Walking can be a big part of developing the muscles that support the back the rest of the time. Certainly, I always say like 3 to 5 miles is a good human baseline. If we look at the hunter-gatherer population, modern folks now, like if you're around that area, then you could, most days you could say, okay, I'm getting adequate walking. And I do want to say that steps per day is not what I'm talking about when I say the movement of walking, because sometimes you could be standing in a classroom. I know all you teachers out there who do a lot of upright physical work and you're getting steps, you're spending time upright, but it's not that stride and that swing of the arms that would get you the same movement nutrition. Carrying, how's your carrying? Like how much time do you feel like you got stuff loading your
So
car?
this is one of the things that's declined as
Really?
my kids have gotten older. I used to carry a lot. My
Yes.
biceps were so magnificent when I
Yeah.
had 2-year-olds. But now, I mean, I carry as part of my exercise.
Right.
And it's somewhat ridiculous when you're in an exercise class and you're like carrying 35-pound weights in the
Carrying
farmer's
nothing to
carry.
nowhere.
Yeah,
Carrying nothing to
back and
nowhere.
forth across the room.
Yeah,
I
right.
carry a lot when I go grocery shopping, which is a couple times a week. I
Mhm.
carry heavy bags loaded with tons of
Okay.
food. And I carry sports equipment for my kids, and I carry in the garden. I do a good
Okay.
amount of like lifting chicken feed to the chicken coop. But I wouldn't say that's a daily, like every single day I'm carrying, like maybe that's a few times a week. Uh, but I do love a good carry.
Yeah.
And that
Well,
change actually, Katie, I would say if you start to frame these things around this is nutritious movement,
yeah.
it changes the way that you take in the groceries. You're no longer thinking, oh no, I have to unload the cart. You're thinking, this is my carrying time.
Yeah. That's right.
I'm my body, it wants to carry things. Ooh, I'm doing an uneven carry, even
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we totally nerd out about it. Right. Like if you
Yeah.
go to the gym and you're picking up things that are representative of things to carry in your life and you're walking back and forth, where your net distance of what you've gone nowhere. You've taken the
Yeah.
thing carried like nowhere. But if you can see that the difference between that scenario and I've got all these groceries to unload and no one will help me and blah blah blah, you get that whole thing
Yeah.
going on. It's like it's really about intention. I'm intending to exercise. I've set up this space. So the reframe a lot of these things just allows you to see like, oh, I intended to move more. And now I'm finding that the opportunities are everywhere. And what a wonderful thing. Sometimes, like, if you can
Yeah.
find some other elements, if you have to stack wood, for example, or you've got to weed a garden, if you can pair it with something else that brings you joy, you can reframe and really engage in the physicality of daily chores. Chores.
Yeah. I usually pair with my kids or my husband.
Right.
And those are the things I like. So we're working on the base of the pyramid. We
Yeah.
have this active rest time, which is like you're moving about, you're standing, you're shifting, maybe you're sitting
Yeah.
in,
You're not really moving, changing the
dynamic
whole
in
function of your
place.
body. Right.
Yeah,
Dynamically in place.
dynamically in place. And then we have walking, and then we have carrying stuff.
Mhm.
Which again is just like so much of our carrying has been outsourced. My gosh, if you are getting your groceries on Instacart, you're not even carrying your groceries in anymore.
No.
So
Right.
okay, good. And then we move up.
So
Yeah.
we move up to making movements. So making movements are like just small things that you do with your hands. Making movements are knitting. It's chopping things to go into a soup. It's kneading bread. They're repetitive. They're small. They really just usually involve the body being in place. Most of the body being in place, while the arms are doing some work of woodworking, carving, building a fire. Like these, they're sort of fine motor, but your arms are being used. And I really wanted to call them out because if we were looking at your life, if we asked all of your different body parts what their experience of your life was, which is a good check-in assignment to do, like have the part that hurts you write you a letter. What is it telling you about its experience of your life? The hands, if you think of like the key, like I spend most of my time typing on a keyboard or holding a phone, like if that's what your hands are mostly doing, there's not a lot of richness to all of these pieces that we have and how well your hands and arms are really wired to your brain, because making is so essential for humanity and has been for millions of years. And then to have such an abrupt cutoff for so many people of to go to very little handwork that's got some coordination to it and that's got variety that produces something. I mean, certainly typing produces documents, right? That's sort of what a lot of people are making these days, beautiful books. But there's something soothing about shelling peas, right? There's something soothing about picking strawberries, right? So like if you can just see that there's other things for the hands to do too. It's like if you have a cat or a dog, but it always lives in your living room and it only has a small little lap that it makes, like it's going to be like, wow, there's a whole other world out there that I'd like to explore. And think of your hands as telling you something similar. I don't want to pick up the phone again. I don't want to type that same limited range of motion again. I want to stretch. I want to feel your weight on me on the ground. I want to feel warm. I want to feel cold. I want to feel strong. I want to struggle a little bit. I like all those things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, making movements. I would say I'm deficient in carrying, but I do a good amount of making.
Making is great.
But I feel that my writing may be crowding out. Maybe crowding out some of that. If I can squeeze in another little bit more writing, then maybe I won't do as much cooking in the kitchen. I make bread, we garden, all those things. They feel like a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
That time is one of the first things to go when I have a big work assignment due, when a book is due.
Well, a big part of this book is recognizing that you're in a different stage right now. And a different stage could be a big work project. It could also be a period of grief, a divorce, an injury, shifting hormonally, right? Like you have to keep reminding yourself that maybe if you're trying to not consider a different movement plan while radically changing what makes up your life, then you're going to feel out of balance. But if you can consider like, okay, I have to actually think about now I'm getting a lot of this type of movement, how else are things being shifted? And then maybe you would need to shift your leisure time activities to support the version of you right now. So like there's that malleability that's really important, even if your book writing only took you 3 weeks, but we know that's not the case. And yeah, you change and maybe you can let some of those other things go. I like to wash dishes. I wash dishes really to balance book writing, to use my hands differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy it. Like, 'cause I still wash my hand a lot and I enjoy it. Like I will sometimes put on a phone call with my sister or put on a movie that I've been wanting to watch, and I just make it pleasurable while I enjoy cleaning the kitchen. I enjoy using my arms in that way. But my frame is, I've been just doing this with my hands, for 6 hours today, that I want to let them do something different, let them out of the house.
Yeah. Okay, so making things.
You want to go next one up?
Yeah, next one up.
Big body work. Big body work. So this is distinctively separate from like walking and carrying together, like rucking, right? You're carrying a load and you're walking. That's big body work. But big body work, in the way that I'm using it, is when you're not transporting something. So you are mostly, your whole person isn't really changing locations. You are not getting those strides from walking, but yet you are carrying a load. So that would be, I think stacking wood would be big body work.
Shoveling compost. We do shoveling the chicken coop.
Compost. Yeah. So you're lifting heavy loads repetitively. I mean, shoveling snow is one of the hardest things to do, because it's just the movements are small but hard. Lifting weights, if you go to the gym and you're lifting weights, that's big body work. A lot of labor falls into that. Cutting trees, so things where you're really getting your heart rate up.
Oh gosh, I just had this memory of when I used to go swimming with my kids. Their favorite thing was to swim to me, and then I'd lift them up and throw them, and then they swim back, and then you lift them up and throw them like that.
Right.
That's my
favorite big body work.
Yeah.
Flying airplane with your kids on the ground is big body work. My favorite line of the book is, don't just make muscles, make memories.
Yeah.
Like it's that idea that, it's the line that made me realize really the motivation for a lot of things that I do. It's like we've totally separated tending to ourselves physically from joy, oftentimes in other domains of our life. The joy is just like, look how physical I am. And that's fine, but it's not relevant or it's not meaningful to a lot of people. And so like by reconnecting other ways that being physical brings us joy that's not related to our own individual physicality for the sake of the physicality, I think is really important. So yeah, definitely wrestling, you know what I mean? Like where you're just doing a lot of sumo wrestling and doing a lot of strength. I used to sumo wrestle my kids all the time. so fun.
That was another question that you asked in the beginning around the why, which is which physical experiences do you miss that you would
Mhm.
like to do again?
Yeah.
Right. And they can fall into this pyramid,
Yeah.
right? Like I miss walking with my, friends on Saturday mornings, or I miss dancing, or I miss, being physical with my kids in that way. And even as my kids grow up, there's still ways in which they continue to be physical that I may be backing off
Hmm.
from. I mean, they've gotten so strong. They're more skilled at certain sports than I am.
Fun.
That's way more skilled than I am. So yeah, just sort of like remembering and bringing back to life the physical experiences that we love, that we enjoy. And that's where it's not about adding on another wellness to do. It's building into the places that will enrich these domains of your life.
And things you
Um,
already love. Like
and
I
your love.
loved airplane with my kids, and now they're, the same size as me. So we've kind of switched it over to um partner acro yoga. Like, let's just try this really fast, right? So it's more even now, and it's harder for me, which I like because now it's challenging to me. Like the same reason you'll go to a personal trainer to say lift this heavy thing in an awkward way because it's good for you. Maybe it's too hard to lift you up. I can't carry you anymore. Why not? As you're flipping a tire, like why not play around with seeing all the different ways you can carry your 15-year-old? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just sort of silly and fun.
I taught yoga for my kids' classes ever since they were in preschool. So since they were like 3, right? I go in
Mhm.
and I teach. In the beginning, when they were 3, we were like learning sign language and doing these little, animal poses. And now my son's in 5th grade, and I'm like throwing like the hardest arm balance pose that I know at them. Like we're all sort of trying to figure out how to balance ourselves on our elbows and all sorts of things. And it's fun. It's challenging for me, but it's also fun to see how that relationship with yoga with them, that play has changed over time. And
Mhm.
that is part of my perfect movement plan. Like
Right.
it's totally dynamic how I am with them. Okay, so we're moving up the pyramid. We got to big body movements, and then what's
So we're almost,
next?
we're almost to the top of the pyramid. So these are getting smaller and smaller. So we're just
Okay.
one down from the top. And climbing clambering is a terminology for really using your arms similarly to how you usually use your legs. So you often stand on your legs. It would be the equivalent of hanging from your arms, right? You're asking your arms to support the rest of your body, like you would ask your legs to support your body. It's a brachiation. So, like you walk with your legs, brachiation would be walking with your hands, and not necessarily like a handstand, but I mean like going down monkey bars, really being able to hold yourself on one arm at a time, taking ladders. Maybe you're going up and down ladders, climbing, rock climbing as a hobby, or scrambling as just part of moving over particular terrain. Swimming is using your arms for propulsion. So swimming goes into that area and it's smaller.
Just crawling on your hands and knees.
Yes, go,
That
yes.
one, yeah. Like scrubbing
Playing
your
with your
floors,
dog, playing with younger kids. Right.
getting
It's
the gum off the floor. Okay.
cleaning, deep cleaning,
Yeah, deep.
looking for that special platter in the way back of the corner
Yeah.
that you never bring out of your cupboards.
Okay, good. Yeah. I feel like I'm doing some of that again. I mean, maybe we're getting to the top of the pyramid, so I'm not doing as much of that. Again, that was something that I did a lot more with kids because
Mhm.
I was such a Katy Bowman fan when I had young kids that I was on those monkey bars with them. Every single time they were there, I was trying to cross the monkey bars, or I was hanging from the tree with
Yeah.
them, or trying to climb the tree with them. And that has shifted and changed over time. I have beautiful giant boulder outside my office and beautiful trees that I used to do a lot more climbing of, that I'm noticing as my kids are doing less of it, I'm also doing less of it too. This makes me feel sad right now thinking about this.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things I did, like they say kids keep you young, is in some of my leisure time, for some of the reasons you're talking about, I volunteer to do recess support at a local school, younger school,
Oh,
and teach PE. So like you can even look for these opportunities of where I want to play on the playground and help model like I had to help for my kids and support them and create games. So that's something that I've done weekly. I find that meaningful. And just because it's gone in the easy way of like it's not here anymore. It's like, well, sometimes you have to go look for it. And that's one way. That's a movement diet supplemental choice. It's also something that enriches my life for other reasons too. It, allows me to help promote movement outside my own family, to offer support to schools that don't have financing, who are cutting recess because there's no recess monitors. It really pins a lot of the things I find important, but it's because of the movement that I even thought that it was something I could do.
Yeah. And I do want to say thank you to you, Katy, about that, because I feel like you changed because you what you taught me about movement in those early years with my kids really changed the course of my relationship with them in those early years. I was so involved in their physical lives at the park. I was in there. I mean, I let go of what it looked like,
Yeah.
that I was like the only adult that was doing these things, because inside I was like, this is so good for my kids. Rather than sitting at the park and kind of hating the park, I liked going to the park. I was getting my movement time. I was getting my kid time, and I would leave as invigorated at playtime as they did. So yeah. So clamoring. Okay, I'm going to think about this, places and ways besides just cleaning, that I can bring some more of that arm clamoring, climbing
Yeah.
back.
A jungle gym is great. Like or maybe like if you have a daily walk that takes you by a park, going through, slide down a couple poles, and go up if there's anything that you can climb that's meant for kids, that's free, and you're allowed to be there at certain times of the day. Just take little detours and spend 5 minutes doing it. It just keeps it so you don't lose the skill.
And we do have a trapeze in our TV room where our TV is.
Mhm.
We have a trapeze and we have rings. That's also the arms overhead movement of
For sure.
hanging
Yeah.
from in a basketball hoop. It's sort of a wild space. But what I notice is that these things can become like furniture, and we just, kind of forget they're there.
Move them
Um,
around.
yeah.
That's the solution to that is if it's movable, move it around
Or
because it
swapping out the little attachments. I
yes,
could do that
yes.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
novelty is like we're
Yeah.
just very much drawn to novelty.
Okay. So now we're at the top of the pyramid, which may be part of my back problem, Katy.
Well, it depends. So I think that like running is a thing that people love to do. And
Uh-huh.
the
This is
reason
my
I
dad and his neck. This is what I worry about.
see that's interesting. Right.
Yeah.
So what you were saying is the fear was more like the movement that you loved would make it so that you couldn't do other things. It would shape your body so
Yeah.
severely or so permanently that you would have other stuff that came up from loving this
Yes.
thing. Okay.
Yes.
So the reason I put running, because running is something that humans have always done. I would say it's a human movement, but it is very much a top of the pyramid movement. And it sits in the context of a much bigger set of movement calories that are not running. So many people's movement diet would be really it would still be running kind of at the top because if you look, this pyramid represents all time. So you're still running a teeny amount of the day, but it sits atop, mostly sitting in a chair for
Yeah.
many people. That's a real common movement diet is to be like, wow, I've got this tip of this piece. And so I'm missing out the things that would stretch out my lower back in other ways that would diversify. I was thinking of like, what would I give your dad? And I was coming up with a little thing in my mind of like, okay, you need to work on these other things. If those health issues were bothering you, like if you were like, I don't know how to fix them, and you could understand how they related maybe to the shape.
What would you give my dad? This is actually a good question.
Yeah.
What would you tell
So,
someone that has this forward neck,
well,
tightness?
I think
Yeah.
if your dad it'd be interesting to have your dad fill out the book, right? So we
Yeah.
could see, I think he himself would probably see the top of his pyramid would be cycling, which I would put cycling as big body work.
Hmm.
That's a big body work type move. Is I would say not even necessarily that he has to decrease the amount of time that he spends cycling, but that he would need to change up how he's sitting. Like, it's like, okay, you love your recycling and you love this chair.
Yeah. You
So
love that big leather chair
yeah,
with the
that's right.
reclining
That's right. So that,
attachment.
like, ultimately that
Yeah.
chair is going to
Yeah.
be
A
what
chair.
doesn't allow you to cycle as much. So
Hmm.
it's all about the framing of the way you're going to get. So I want you to be doing some active sitting so that you get out of your bicycle shape a little bit. Have you ever seen Triplets of Belleville?
Mm-mm.
It's a hand-drawn French cartoon about a cyclist, and it's all about like the Tour de France and this kind of obsessive cyclist, and his grandmother, I think, raises him. But anyway, the way the cartoon walks is in this bicycle shape.
Yes.
And his calves are massive, and his spine
Yes.
completely goes over, and his head goes all the way back. And so, like, I would highly recommend watching it with your family. It has no words. It's amazing. It's an amazing movie.
Uh-huh.
So I was thinking about that character as you're talking about your dad. So I would, yes, look at non-cycling times to change up body shape. I would add in some hanging to help erect the spine. I would teach the head ramp is in there because he's the movement nutrition that's missing when you've got a lot of upper back curve and then like a neck curve in the opposite way to compensate, sort of like looking through bifocals while your head is way forward out in front of you. That can really load like it can load the throat tubes and the spinal column in a very particular way. Teach them the head ramp and say, I want you to head ramp some of the time that you're cycling, and I definitely want you to head ramp the rest of the time. And I would probably come up with 3, because that's a good number, depending on how motivated the person is, 3 exercises that would balance out what he's not getting from cycling and also would reduce some of that permanent curvature that turns you into that bike shape. Hip extension would be one, thoracic extension would be another, and then something for the core that would make sure that he's not losing his ability to twist because it's such a linear, like the core doesn't really change position at all. Just a stiff torso.
So Katy, you're such a biomechanist. You throw these words out: hip extension, thoracic extension. Like we all just know, oh yeah, that hip extension exercise that I do on a regular basis.
Right.
Okay. So hip extension.
That's how I feel when you say compassion. I'm like, what do you mean?
Okay. Hip extension. So now we're getting, let me just orient folks. Now we're getting the micronutrients.
Right.
So you're going to start figure out your why, your movement why. Then you're going to look at how many movement calories are you taking in, and where are you in terms of, you actually have us charted out. Like, how am I? Am I at the Hadza tribe, or am I at, way under what needs to be needed?
Yeah.
Then you're going to go into the macronutrients, which is what we just did with this movement pyramid. You're going to look at those macronutrients in the important domains of your life. After you've done all that, now we're going to start do thoracic extensions and hip extensions and
we're in micro
gripping and eye movement and pressure and all these really like vitamin A, vitamin K kind of stuff.
Right.
So, and these 3 exercises that you're giving your dad probably are 3 ones that I could do too, because running is similar, but some of our repetitive exercises tend to have these similar forward motion stuff. Okay. Hip extension. Okay. But actually real quick. So the example of these micronutrients are hip flexion, hip extension, dynamic hips, dynamic knees, active feet, fixed spine, dynamic grip. I mean, you're going through all these detailed stuff. Agility, impact, lung movement, heart movement, dynamic eyes, right? These things that we don't think about when we think we're getting our 150 minutes and 2 times a week of strength training.
That's right. Yeah. So your dad's going to fill out this chart, right? He's going to be like, okay, I'm outside. My eyes are moving. I've got lots of leg power. My heart and lungs are going right. There's so many nutrients that are found in this thing that he loves. Plus, he finds it meaningful, I would imagine, and potentially like functional if it's transporting him here or there. But he would perhaps have not a lot of bone loading, right? He never spends any time carrying his weight on his hips, for example. I would just quickly give him hip extension, which would be your leg going behind you, because your leg never goes behind you when you're on a bike, and a little bit more when you're running, perhaps, depending on how sticky your hip joints are. You can run using your lower back and not your hips, so you need to be a little technical.
I can. I do.
A lot. That's right. Of course you do. So I would give your dad a hip extension exercise of, I want you to do these floor lunge stretches, and you're going to do them 3 times a day. And you're going to do them, for a few minutes each. And that's just going to open up that hip a little bit.
You said floor lunges? Is that what you said?
Floor lunges, right? Yeah. So you get on the floor, put one leg out in front of him, and move his pelvis forward and get a different movement to his body that is probably not showing up. So it's not showing up in his leisure. It's not showing up in his work, and it's not showing up in his home. He's going to have to supplement with it. Just like you have to go down and get a supplement if your diet does not contain a certain thing you need.
Right. So if you're sitting all day, you're going to need those hip extensions.
That's right.
Same kind of
thing.
Okay, that's right. Gotcha.
I would give him thoracic extension, which is to uncurl the upper spine. So this is also a good movement if you are on the computer a lot, if you're looking down at your phone a lot, if your arms are out in front of you, you drive a lot, right? It's that curve of the upper back that tends to come forward. So I would say thoracic extension for you. You're going to put your hands on the back of a chair or up on a wall straight, and then you're going to walk back and let your head drop through your arms. And you're going to like try to straighten out your spine.
This is like a down dog against the wall,
Exactly.
or one that you taught me that I do in the kitchen almost every day.
On a counter.
Is hands on the counter, walking back, stretching out. I do it while I'm waiting for the pot of tea to boil.
That's right. Like, and that context is great. Like I can tell you, Daddy, if you make a cup of coffee in the morning, like you're well, for that duration of your waiting time, you're going to be doing this thoracic stretch.
And it feels so good.
And it feels so good.
So
and the thing is, like, once
and a big exhale when you do it. Yeah.
You feel better when you're more nourished.
Yeah.
We have a hard time recognizing symptoms of movement malnutrition. We just think they're getting older. They're general aches and pains. It's malaise. It's brain fog. It's a lot of things. It's like, make sure you're not movement nutrient deficient first before assuming that you know what a lot of these things are coming from, because movement is a ubiquitous input to the body. You're never not inputting your movement diet. And so that's a really good place to start looking to make some transitions. One more for your dad, probably calf stretch, because calf stretch is going to help undo a lot of the tension in his legs that come up and down. Also, calf stretch when your calves are really tight, like they get when you're like, so much of cycling is powered by your calves. In addition to your quads, there's a lot of calf and leg work that goes into it. So stretching those out, and then that also helps when you're upright. It helps you be more upright, and it stops the forces that further push your spine forward out in front of you.
And it also reverses some of the effect of our shoes if you're wearing regular shoes that have that slight heel. Even if you are in a tennis shoe, you're in a slight heel that's pushing that foot forward. And my favorite calf stretch I do while I am brushing my teeth, I have a 2-minute electric toothbrush. And I do just 1 minute. I stand on the stairs by my, there's a mirror right there. I stand on the stairs. I brush one side. The little thing goes beep, beep while I'm in a calf stretch on the stair. And then I switch sides and do the calf stretch on the other side. Simple. Done. Every day. Calf stretch. Twice a day.
Yeah.
So these are all things that one of the things that I like about you, Katy, is that you teach us. These are things we can start integrating into our life. Some of them are more technical, but you can get a calf stretch if you are hiking, up a hill or climbing that rock. That's my opposite. I should climb more up. That's going to stretch your calf as you're climbing up, pushing your heel down.
Yeah, you can play with these categories. Like walking is a category. So if you're noticing that your feet, for example, need more movement, and your walking is always done in a particular terrain, then you can get more dynamic feet simply by switching where you walk. You don't have to walk more. You just have to walk maybe in a different location or change something about the thing you are already doing so that it increases the nutrient density of what you're doing.
Beautiful. So, Katy, congratulations on my perfect movement plan. I have a different perspective on perfection when it comes to movement. This has been something that's personally just evolving for me over time. But if you have never looked at any of Katy's stuff, you can dive right into my perfect movement plan. And if you have been following this podcast and following me for a long time and you've been doing all of this, you will get so much more by doing my perfect movement plan. So I'm holding up a printout.
I've got an early copy.
You got the early copy. Where's my early copy? I had to print this.
It's coming. We'll get you a good one. Not a good
no, this is and you'll also be working on that making movement, because you'll be doing some handwriting as you fill out.
That's right. That's why it's not an app.
It's not an app.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate talking to you always.
Yeah, super fun. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Wise Effort podcast. Wise Effort is about you taking your energy and putting it in the places that matter most to you. And when you do so, you'll get to savor the good of your life along the way. If you would like to become a member of the Wise Effort podcast, go to wiseeffort.com. And if you like this episode and think it would be helpful to somebody, please leave a review over at Podchaser or call me at 805-457-2776. I would like to thank my team, my partner in all things, including the producer of this podcast, Craig, Ashley Hyatt, the podcast manager, And thank you to Ben Gold at Bell and Branch for our new music. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and it's not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatments.